You ate something sweet today. Maybe you don't even remember doing it. A splash of juice, a piece of bread, a coffee with something stirred into it. It felt like nothing. It felt automatic. But 10,000 years ago, that same taste on your tongue would have stopped a person in their tracks. It would have been the best thing that happened to them all year. For most of human history, sugar wasn't a flavor. It was an event. So let's start at the beginning. Not with a factory, not with a farm, but with a fistful of stolen honey and a body covered in bee stings. Humans didn't invent sweetness. We found it, already built into the world, and evolution had spent millions of years preparing us to recognize it instantly. Your tongue has taste receptors specifically tuned to sugar, wired directly into your brain's reward system. This isn't a coincidence. It's a survival tool. In the wild, almost nothing sweet is poisonous, and almost everything sweet is packed with fast, usable energy. A brain that could detect sugar in half a second before any conscious thought kicked in had an edge. It ate first, it survived famines, it passed that wiring down. By the time actual Homo sapiens existed, roughly 300,000 years ago, that wiring was already ancient. We weren't discovering a new sense, we were inheriting one. The earliest evidence we have of humans deliberately seeking out concentrated sugar isn't a farm or a granary. It's rock art. In caves in Spain and South Africa, some over 8,000 years old, there are paintings of people climbing cliffs and trees, surrounded by swarms of bees, reaching into hives with their bare hands. One famous painting, in the Cuevas de la Araña in Valencia, shows a figure dangling from ropes made of woven grass, arm deep in a wild hive, bees circling their entire body. Think about what that means. These people weren't stumbling onto sugar by accident. They were risking pain, risking swelling, risking a fall from a cliff face, all to get a substance that has zero nutrients besides pure, fast energy. That's not a snack. That's a calculated risk, repeated across generations, because the payoff was worth the danger. Here's what's strange. Bees produce venom specifically to punish exactly this behavior. Millions of years of evolution on the bees' side, built entirely to keep humans and other animals away from their food store. And it didn't work. Humans climbed anyway. Every time. That should tell you something about how strong this drive really is. For tens of thousands of years, honey was as close to pure sugar as most humans would ever get. It was rare, seasonal, and defended by insects that could kill you if you were unlucky. That scarcity mattered. When something dangerous and rare also happens to be the most calorie-dense substance around, the brain doesn't file it as a treat. It files it as treasure. And then something changed the entire trajectory of human history. Around 8,000 years ago, in New Guinea, people began cultivating a wild grass. Not for its leaves, not for its seeds, but for the sweet pulp inside its stalk. That plant was sugarcane. For the first time, humans weren't just hunting for sweetness in the wild. They were growing it, deliberately, on purpose, in fields. This is where the story usually gets told wrong. Most people assume sugar spread quickly once it was farmed, because of course it did. Who wouldn't want more of it? But that's not what the evidence shows. Sugarcane cultivation crept across Asia at a walking pace, generation after generation, reaching India roughly 5,000 years later, where it was first refined into a crude, crystallized form. Ancient Sanskrit texts describe this crystallized sugar as something almost medicinal, used in small, careful amounts, more like a spice than a food. For thousands of years, that's exactly what sugar was to most of the world. Not a staple, a luxury so concentrated it needed to be measured in pinches. And then something even stranger happened. Sugar left Asia, and it stopped being a spice. It became a weapon of economics. By the time sugar reached the Mediterranean and then Europe, roughly 1,000 years ago, it was so rare that it was sold by apothecaries, next to medicine, priced by the ounce, locked away like a precious metal. A single cone of refined sugar could cost more than most people earned in a week. Kings served it at banquets specifically so their guests would see how wealthy they were. Sweetness, at that point in history, wasn't comfort food. It was a public display of power. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The same craving that once sent a person climbing a cliff face for wild honey, risking a fall for a mouthful of sweetness, is the exact same craving that later justified some of the most brutal systems humans have ever built. As European demand for sugar exploded, growing sugarcane at scale required enormous amounts of forced labor, and that demand became one of the central engines of the transatlantic slave trade. Millions of human beings were kidnapped, transported, and worked to death, in staggering part, to keep supplying a taste that our ancestors' brains had been chasing since long before agriculture existed. That's not a metaphor. That is a direct, traceable line from a dopamine receptor shaped by evolution to sugar plantations to some of the darkest chapters in recorded history. And this is where everything changes. Modern food science eventually figured out something that ancient humans never could have. They found what researchers call the bliss point, the precise concentration of sugar that maximizes craving without ever fully satisfying it. Not too sweet that it repels you. Not too little that it fails to grab your brain's attention. An exact number, engineered into sodas, cereals, sauces, and snacks, designed to trigger the same ancient reward circuit that once rewarded a starving forager for finding ripe fruit. They didn't invent a new hunger. They found the oldest one we have and calculated exactly how hard to press it. So here's the full picture. For nearly all of human history, sugar was rare, dangerous to obtain, or reserved for the powerful. Your ancestors didn't evolve a craving for convenience. They evolved a craving for survival in a world where sweetness almost never showed up, and when it did, it meant something good was finally within reach. You inherited that exact same wiring, except now it's not hiding in a beehive 50 feet up a cliff. It's in a vending machine 3 feet away from you, available at any hour, in unlimited quantity, for less money than your ancestors could have imagined. The craving hasn't changed in 300,000 years. Only the distance between you and it has. And maybe that's the real discovery hiding inside this whole story. Not sugar itself, but the realization that so much of what feels like a modern choice, a quick decision, a small indulgence, is actually something ancient, reaching forward through time, still running the same program it always has, in a body that was never built to say no this easily. Your ancestors climbed cliffs and endured bee stings for a taste you can get in 5 seconds without even standing up. They didn't know they were shaping the mind you'd inherit. They reached for it anyway. And somewhere inside every sweet thing you'll ever taste, that reach is still happening. Subscribe to Yedd for more videos like this. Thank you.